This is a session which is actually part of a series of demos that we're doing for Blue XP Workload Factory. Um, if you've been in the previous sessions, you'll see that each have seen that we focus on different areas of Workload Factory. For example, last time we demonstrated how the storage section of Workload Factory can be used to assess and analyze storage costs so that you can find potential savings. The session before that was about databases. And in this session, we're going to be focused on GenAI. So yeah, I think we'll get started. So my name is Robert Bell. I'm from the product enablement team in NetApp. And with me is Luba. Luba, do you want to give a quick introduction?
Well, I'm Luba, also from NetApp, and I'm part of the product solution architect team.
Thanks,
That's
Luba.
it.
And we're going to be showing a demonstration. Well, actually, Luba is going to be showing a demonstration of Workload Factory for GenAI applications. I'll show a few slides in advance just to give the context of what we're talking about. And the focus here is about Blue XP Workload Factory and Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP, or FSx for ONTAP, which is the underlying storage that is used for Blue XP. So this session is going to be focused on bringing data into GenAI applications. So you probably all know that GenAI is well, it seems to be something huge. We don't really know how it will change the market across all industries, but even currently we can see a huge rise in everything to do with development around Gen AI. And I think one of the main reasons that this change is happening so rapidly is because it does give organizations across all industries a way to develop a new breed of applications that do something that wasn't possible before. And it's mostly around the fact that they can just save a lot of time for people. So an application that can understand language, that can talk to you, chat with you, and it can summarize things and analyze information the way that previously only humans could. This is really one of the things that brings great benefits. There is also the fact that it can produce images and creative works. But I think we're going to focus now just on the business side of it. So to sort of put it into the application level, we're going to be talking about sort of like the under the hood of Gen AI. So there's the application itself. It could be a chatbot or a virtual assistant or any kind of application that generates new information. Now, typically, if we really dumb down the architecture, we look at a very simple architecture. The way that a chatbot, for example, works, it has a foundation model. Typically nowadays, you don't create your own foundation models, but use public foundation models like the ones on Amazon Bedrock. And the chatbot is just an application. The user asks a question, inputs the prompt. The prompt is sent to the foundation model, for example, a large language model, and then it receives an answer. So this is really the basic functionality, like ChatGPT, for example. You ask a question, or make a request, and it responds. That's the basic infrastructure, but there's something called RAG. And I don't know, some of you might have heard of it. And to sort of explain what RAG is, I'll show you how a chatbot without RAG would answer the question, what is RAG? So if I ask the question to the chatbot, what is RAG? It would give me an answer. It would show me several different things that could be the answer to what is the question, depending on the context, because the chatbot is connected to a large language model that it knows how to speak, it knows how to communicate, it might know how to summarize things, but it doesn't know what I'm talking about. It doesn't know the context. So here there are three different examples from project management or random access patterns. and relationships among processes. This is sort of like a very detailed answer, but none of this information is relevant to the topic that I'm talking about. So how do we bring it into context? We do something called RAG, which is Retrieval-Augmented Generation. So it's based on the same idea of a chatbot and the foundation model, sort of like the brain that knows how to communicate. But in addition, we add another section, which is the knowledge base, where I can put data, relevant data in that knowledge base. And when I ask a question, or the user asks a question, the first step is retrieval. So before passing this information on to the brain, the foundation model, it first retrieves information from a database called the vector database, the relevant information. So depending on what I asked, it gathers the information related to this topic. It then adds this information to my query. So this is the second stage, the augmentation in the RAG. So the foundation model doesn't just get a question, it gets a question with the context. And then the generated output, the G, would be an answer which is relevant to the topic I'm talking about. So this is a very simplified example, but if I have certain information, research information or documentation or something that is unique data that I have in my company, I can feed that into the foundation model and then give professional answers to the questions. So now if we have RAG, and let's say this RAG, the data in the RAG has information about GenAI, when I ask what RAG is, it will give me the correct answer because it did this process of looking for the relevant information and understanding that that's what I'm talking about. So this is the correct answer. And now, I mean, there's so much information around this, around GenAI, and you probably hear a lot about GenAI, but I really want to dive into the architecture for this thing called RAG. And this is what we're going to demonstrate in action as something that you can do with Workload Factory. So if we look at the architecture itself, this is the architecture for RAG. Let me try and mark something here. Oh no, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, this should work. Laser pointer. Okay, so just so that you can see what I'm talking about. The architecture, in this case, here we're using Amazon Bedrock as the source of the foundation models. Amazon Bedrock has a very wide variety of different foundation models. So for a lot of organizations that are developing applications in AWS, it makes more sense to use a public foundation model, which is constantly upgraded and updated. Using that instead of developing your own, it's developing a foundation model is something you can do, but it takes a lot of time, costs millions of dollars. So with Amazon Bedrock, with an API, you can develop, have an application that talks to Amazon Bedrock through the API and chats or communicates with these foundation models. So this is Amazon Bedrock. It's a service that you would connect to. But if you were building an application, this is the application where the user talks to a UI, user interface. There would be some sort of backend and AI engine. And then this is sort of like the chatbot that I was talking about before. And then if you have RAG, you need this data source and vector database. So this is an architecture. We're going to show a specific architecture, which is the one that you can build with Workload Factory, which uses FSx for ONTAP, the storage, the Amazon storage that supports RAG data. And Workload Factory will really build this entire architecture for you so that you don't have to start developing these different applications, the different components and the different connectivities. But what's more is because FSx for ONTAP is part of the ONTAP ecosystem, if you have data on premises on some sort of ONTAP system, you can actually use SnapMirror, the replication technology, SnapMirror or FlexCache. This is built-in technology to mirror the information that is on premises in FSx for ONTAP. So essentially, you can build a GenAI application in AWS, use the Amazon public foundation models to be able to have a chatbot up and running without the problem of moving the data to AWS, because you can simply create a mirror of the original data source. And this is something that can be used within the Amazon Bedrock-based application. So this is essentially what Workload Factory allows you to build. And with this, we're going to see in the demonstration, we're going to see that in action. We're going to see how by building that, you have several advantages. First of all, you're preserving the format of the data. So if it's a file format with different directory structures, you can preserve that structure. You don't lose the integrity of the data. And you can use permissions, the same permissions that you would use on premises, for example. You can use these permissions to make sure that any user that asks a question, when the data is being retrieved, it won't provide any information that this user is not authorized to access. So you have a secure environment, but that also takes care of the permissions and privacy of the data. So we're going to see this in action now. At this stage, I'm going to hand it over to Luba. Are you ready with the demo?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Let's put this back to.
I'll just
Okay. I'm
take
going to
the
stop
share.
sharing now.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm now going to share my screen. You'll be able to see my demo. I'll stop in a few places and give some more details on what's going on. And just want to say that if you have any questions, feel free to ask. We have a Q&A, we have a chat option here. So anything you want to ask, anything about the demo or what you heard before, feel free to ask. We have a team here of people who will respond to any questions. Right, and with that in mind, let me share my screen. Just a second, this is the one I need. And hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yep. It should be
Perfect.
up now.
Excellent. So what you'll be able to see in this demo, you'll see me adding a new knowledge base. And a knowledge base, like Robert said, is a combination of two things. One is the configuration on what models, what foundation models would be used, both the embedding model and the chat model, and also some additional information such as on which FSX for ONTAP system, this new volume will be created where we will put the vector database. And I'll show you again, also in this demo, how RAG can be useful. So what happened before you add your own private data and how it looks after you add the private data. And I'll end up with showing you a sample application that our engineers created that you will actually have access to. It's available on our GitHub, and it allows you to create an application for end users that will be able to interact with the chat. So let me begin now, and you'll see the process. Right, so what you're seeing now is the Workload Factory screen. And oops, sorry about that. Just a second, something had gone wrong. Let me stop sharing for a moment, and I will redo that. Just a second, sorry about that. Okay. Let's give it another go. It does not. Okay, here it is. Right, so you see me creating a knowledge base. I'll call it life science because the example I'm using is an FDA file. And here I'm just configuring some information on the FSx for ONTAP system that would be used to host the new volume. It's not working well, unfortunately. Don't know what's happened to my Zoom. So let me try to move it to a different screen. Hopefully it will solve the problem. Okay. And more share and share this screen instead. And we'll give it another try. So again, the creation of the knowledge base. And no, unfortunately, it does not work. So what I'll do in this case, let me just, instead of sharing this screen with you, I'll just do something else and I'll show you a live system instead. Sometimes, I guess, live system works better than demo.
Yeah,
Fine.
the live system is the backup for
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Usually the other way around.
I know, but it's okay.
Yeah, while you're setting it
happen.
up, there was a question here about the order of, I just answered in the Q&A about the order of things, just to sort of like reiterate that when there's a query, when you're using RAG, just this is just about the order. So the question was whether the order is that I showed is correct, whether the query goes to the LLM first. But my point was that before the chatbot or the application sends the query to the LLM, to the foundation model, it needs to first get the relevant information from the vector database. So it's not I guess a chatbot without RAG, the query goes direct. You're talking directly to the foundation model, the LLM. But when you're using RAG, first the relevant information is added to the query. So it's a bit strange, but the query first is augmented and then sent to the LLM. So it's sort of like a different order. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, absolutely. So right, I hope you can see my screen now.
We see
Hopefully
the
it will work. Perfect. Okay, so this is the Workload Factory GUI that I'm sure quite a few of you already seen if you've been here on the previous sessions. And I'll go to the AI workload. Now I already have it deployed in my environment. So all I need to do now is create a new knowledge base. So I'll click on Create Knowledge Base. I can give it a name. Let's call it LS for Life Science. The next part of configuring a knowledge base is configuring what embedding model and what chat models will be used. We have a few available, and you can choose whatever one works best for your environment, for your budget, and for your type of data. You'll see that there's a few parts within Workload Factory GenAI where we allow you and your customers as well to configure the knowledge base and how we interact with the data source in such a way that you get the best results, because each data type is different. So you might need to change some of the configuration to match that. The next part is choosing the system, again, where I want to add this new volume. I'll call it LS vol. And you can see here a snapshot policy. So you can choose a snapshot policy that exists on your FSx for ONTAP and use that so you'll have a copy of your volume. You'll be able to restore from that if needed. And I'll click here on Create Knowledge Base. So what's happening now in the back end of the system is that the environment or Workload Factory creates automatically this new volume and add to this volume the vector database. Now, before I'll add new data source, what I want to show you is what happens before I add any of my data, right? So I have here a new knowledge base. You can see that it's currently in public mode. And that means that when I'll ask a question, because there's no private data to rely on or not private data to look at, the chat foundation model will answer based on the information it has. So if I'll ask, what is MOV? And MOV is something that is information from MOV exists in my knowledge base. But again, I haven't added it yet. So let's see what happens if I'll ask this question. And I'll ask it, as I said, on a public mode. And you can see that the answer is that MOV is a file format, primary use for storing video and audio data, which is true, but it's not the MOV that I was interested on. So let's do the second part. And here I'll click on Add Data Source. I'll choose where my data is located. Now, in my case, my data is located here on an SMB volume. And because this is an SMB volume, I'll also need to add information about Active Directory. And this is an important part because this will allow me to make sure that the people who access the file, who get information from that specific data source, actually have permissions to do that. So let's say, put here. This is a test environment, so I'll just put this data. And here I can choose whether I want to get all the data in my volume or whether I want to choose a specific folder. So let's for this choose directory 1 on this volume, and I'll click next. And the final part in the configuration is a chunking strategy. Now, chunking strategy is a major part in anything that relates to GenAI. And this talks about how we, as the name suggests, chunk or split the data into a smaller, more manageable parts. Each of those parts will be later sent by Workload Factory to the embedding model, will receive back the vector, and put the vector into our vector database. Now, because we know the data comes in different forms and different languages and so on, we wanted to give you the options to try and find the best chunking strategy for your type of data. And we have two different strategies today. One is multi-sentences, where you can choose between 1 and 100 sentences and chunk your data according to that. The other type is based on character, right? So if your data is maybe structured in a way that sentences, then chunking it by sentences does not make sense. For example, maybe it's in a language like Japanese, where maybe sentence structure might be slightly different. This is something you can look at, and you can choose whatever you want. I'll leave it here for 5 sentences, and permission aware, I'll leave it active as well. And I'll click on Add. And what will happen in the background is that the Workload Factory and the AI agent that Robert talked about beforehand will look at the data, identify all the files that needs to be embedded. And you can see right now we're running the embeddings part. It will chunk the information based on the chunking strategy we chose previously, send all the chunks to the foundation model that we chose, retrieve back the vectors, and put them in the database along with the metadata of the file. So it can later check for permissions, right? Make sure who can access it and who cannot. Metadata is also important to make sure that the data in the vector DB is up to date. So for example, let's say you have a volume with many, many files, and those files, some of them won't change throughout time, but some would be added and some will be removed. Our AI agent knows how to manage that. It will identify any new files that were added since the last scan and do the whole process with them again and just those files, chunk them, send them to the foundation model, get back vectors, and so on. if there are files that have been deleted, it will remove the vectors from those files from the database. So you always keep the information in your vector DB up to date, and you don't have to worry about it, right? The AI agent and Workload Factory manages all of that for you. So
Luba,
what? Yes.
can I just, I mean, for comparison, if I was just using, I don't know, just S3 object storage for my data, then would that also be automatic, or would I have to keep
You will
updating
have
that?
to manage that you will have to manage that. It's a great question, and that's something that when our engineers have been working on this solution, we really wanted to make sure that we try to simplify the process as much as we can, right? Reduce the management task to the minimum possible, right? So you don't have, once you add your knowledge base here, we take care of all the management of the data, right? We will see if something has been changed, if something been removed. If permissions will be changed, we obviously will update it as well. So you don't need to manage that at all. And that's a great thing and a great feature of this solution. So we're almost at the end of this demo. And the last thing I wanted to show you, as you can see now, all the data has been embedded. And if I'll ask the same question again, what is MOV? Now, sorry, what is MOV? Now that my data is in organization mode, so private mode, if I'll ask the question once again, what will happen is just like Robert explained. Our tool will actually look first, will identify, based on the question, the relevant vectors in the database, in the vector DB that we just updated, and will identify the relevant part or the relevant vectors that's best suited to answer the question, collect all of them, send them to the chat model that we defined previously, and the chat model will take all this data, and you can see that for the same knowledge base, I haven't changed anything other than adding the data. I now get a different answer, and an answer based on my file. And you can see right now when I ask about MOV, I got the information about the drug MOV, which is what I was looking at. And another thing we have here for you is citation. So you can see not just the answer, but also the information of the file and the path that contain the answer, so you know where the data had come from. And by the way, if I would use this console as a user that does not have access to this file, I would likely get an answer similar to this one, or might be getting an answer saying, I'm sorry, I don't have the information to answer the question for you. But because my user have access to this file, I got the answer that I was looking for. And
So
the last,
just an example for that could be, for example, if certain users had different permissions, if you're asking a chatbot questions, it needs to know who you are. So if you were, for example, a researcher who is a contractor of this company, you have access to all of the information in these private files, then when you ask a question, it will take this research information from that file, right? But if the same application could be used by multiple users and they would be getting different answers based on the information they are allowed to access. Is that correct?
You're correct. And again, without you having to manage that, right? Because it's already managed on the FSx for ONTAP level, because those files already have set permissions. All we're doing is utilizing the FSx for ONTAP capabilities of user and data management, and we're taking advantage of them and bringing them here as well. So the answers will be provided based on your permissions, and if Robert has different permissions than me, he will get other answers than me. And the same goes for everybody else. And that means you can create one chatbot with different types of data and have different teams, different people and individuals using that, right? You can even technically perhaps create a chatbot that could be utilized both internally and externally to an organization. You have the complete control around that. Now, unfortunately, my demo is a bit iffy today, but the last thing I want to show you is when you create a knowledge base and you tested it and you ask questions and you make sure that the configuration is such that pleases you, right? Both from the chunking perspective and so on. What you can do then is you can publish that and make it accessible for your end users, right? People who are not necessarily have access to Workload Factory. And that is a very simple process. All you need to do is go to your knowledge base, click on manage knowledge base, and in the actions here, go to the authentication settings, choose the issuer that you want to use. It could be Amazon Cognito, it could be Active Directory, whatever you want. You input the information here. And then after you do that, you'll be able to click here on the publish. And your knowledge base would now be accessible outside of Workload Factory, only using the authentication provider that you specified here. Now we do have, again, unfortunately it's not working right now, but there is a sample application that our engineer in NetApp created that's available for you. And Robert, we have the link for that right later on.
Yeah, we'll send the link to
Perfect.
this. And
Excellent.
this is, yeah, just to maybe understand what the benefit of that is. I think that one of the things in GenAI is that, there's just so much information. There's so many things that people are trying to do. Sometimes it's just difficult to get started. And, if I wanted to just get a chatbot connected to my enterprise data easily, I mean, this is something that, it doesn't take days or weeks. I mean, this is really something that if you know what you're doing, if you have the AWS account, you have the credentials, you can just get this up and running really quickly. Is that right? I mean, this is really something that I think that very quickly you create the chatbot, you can test it, and then you can make it, even with this sample application, you have to build your own chatbot. You can start using it, even if this is not the final product, but you can get something up and running and get a group of users to start using it, which I think is sometimes an advantage in this case when you just want to get to market with some sort of new service really quickly. It's really, even if this is not the final product, I think it's something that the speed of which you can do this is quite incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. As you saw me doing here today, I mean, it's the live system, and you saw me adding a whole new data source and started chatting with that within minutes. So that's something you can try to do yourself. Input your own information. By the way, your private data stays private. All Workload Factory configuration lives within your VPC in AWS. It does not go out. We also take care of all the security parts of that. So we create private endpoints to make sure that the communication between the AI agent, the Amazon Bedrock, and your FSX is all done privately. So it's also something that's important to note. And I think that is it, Robert. I'll give you back the floor.
Oh yeah, I'll go back to the slides I was showing. So do you see the slide right now?
Yes.
So this is a list of resources that you can use to get started right away. There's the link at the top. The URL at the top is just to go into Workload Factory. You can also use the QR code that's on the screen. And the links, I think we're going to be able to send them in the chat. If that's possible. Yeah, here we go. So they should be in the chat so that you can copy these links if you want to use them. This is links to the documentation, blogs of how to get started, and this sample application, which Luba mentioned. And another thing is that we have, at the end of this month, we have big event Insight in Las Vegas. So if any of you are going there, please come to the sessions. We have 4 different sessions just about this specific development, this specific feature. So this is something that's, if you're in Insight, you can come to any one of these sessions or all of them. And you'll be able to see these things, get much more details about it. So I think at this point, we'll open for questions and answers. I see there were quite a few questions in the Q&A.
Right. So I'm just answering some of them, but I'll take the opportunity to answer to the question about information about the file format. Now, if I understand the question correctly, we're currently not having question, or we're not, the way the chatbot works is that we take the information from the file data itself, not from the metadata. We're using the metadata more when it comes to permissions and understanding if a file is older or newer. But if that is an interest about, and you are interested to know information, or you think that there is a use case around the file format, let us know. We'll love to hear about it. One of the things we're definitely doing right now is talking to quite a few companies and partners who have been working with or planning their next AI project, and we're getting their feedback and seeing how we can help them. So just, let us know what you're trying to do, and we'll see how we can help.
Okay, I see. Again, this is your chance to ask questions. We have the expert here who can answer them. Okay, so I'd like to thank you all for participating. Like I said, if you're coming to Insight this year, please check out the sessions on Workload Factory and GenAI. And we're going to be doing sessions like this around once a month. So stay tuned for these kind of sessions. It was a pleasure presenting with you, Luba. I think that there was some really, I think, unique things here that, are really a game changer for companies that want to get started with Gen AI really quickly. It's really something that allows people to make added value applications very fast, and I think that's one of the
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Just one more thing, Robert, if you don't mind. I'm just scrolling now through the questions that were asked previously. An important question that I was asked, and I want to talk a little bit about, is private data, right? Things like PIIs and all those things. So I'm happy to say that we're currently working on a new feature that will be introduced to this solution you saw today, where we'll be able actually to add the ability to mask private information before the data is sent to the foundation model. So, no worries about security. And if you have somebody ask a question, you don't have to, to worry that it suddenly will have, seen from some private data, like, I don't know, credit card numbers or social security numbers.
Yeah. And this is something that I think, depending on the organization, some organizations have more strict regulations about privacy, I would say, and there are things like HIPAA in healthcare, and in in the financial industry, there are different levels of privacy. And again, this is something that you can just prevent this information from being embedded. So avoid the situation where any of this information could be exposed. So I think there's just one more question that Yuval is taking care of here. But we have a lot of really cool features coming up for Workload Factory, and it's something that every month there's a new release. So a lot of the things that are going to be developed will really turn this into a very powerful tool. So I recommend to just start using it, start getting to know it, even if you don't really need it right now, because this is really something that is gonna just make the whole idea of infrastructure for Gen AI so much easier. So thanks again for being with us. We're going to stay around just in case there's any more questions, but it was a pleasure. Thanks a lot, Luba. Thanks a lot to Yuval for handling the questions.